Like, I really believe the word of God in Mormon scripture, it talks about the iron rod, is the word of God to you, Casey, and the word of God to me, Lindsay, which could be in a song, a poem, a podcast.
Welcome back to Case Studies. I'm with my longtime friend.
It's good to
like
see
a
you.
long time.
I know.
Yeah, like 20
years.
Yeah, 20-year friend, Lindsay Hadley. And this is what I would say about Lindsay. You never cease to amaze me at how you send it. Like, it's almost like you're fearless. And I think
Oh, man.
I think it's a trait that's a gift that you have. Like, when we go through kind of your life and the experiences that you had, there's a bit of fearlessness of just jumping in and trusting, whether it's trusting God or trusting that it's going to work out. That's just put you in like the most crazy situations. Like, anytime you tell me what you're working on, I'm like, that's insane. How are you at that table? How did you pull that off? How did you like believe that you could do that? And so I'm so excited to like jump in and I think the theme, when I was thinking about the theme today, it's of taking action and trusting. Those are two things that I want to get into your psychology on how you think about that, because I've just, I've noticed it and always admired it.
Wow.
As I've kind of watched your career, how you're just willing to jump in and trust.
You are so sweet. That's like, I'm taking this in. You're good at this thing.
No, it's special.
Like, already, I'm like open hearted. I'm like,
no,
you
have a gift.
Thank you.
Like, it's like a legit gift. I'm trying to think of anybody in the world that I know that does it more than you. And I'm like, I can't think of anybody off the top of my head that I'm like, she just goes. She like gets this vision and she goes, and she's a bit fearless.
Oh, wow.
And it's like such an admirable quality.
Wow. Thank you so much. I'll say I've contemplated on that, and I've wondered if it's like reckless audacity, because at times, it doesn't always work out.
Do you feel
you take risks? Sometimes, it's a high contact sport. You crash and burn.
Yeah. Like, and obviously, like, I want to get into some of the times it didn't work, because I think that's the one that everybody fears failure so bad. And I think when you failed, you fear failure less.
Yes.
Kind of like, I think about this analogy of like, you fear breaking a bone until you break a bone, and then you realize that they heal, but they still hurt.
Yeah, totally. Like, it's not for the faint of heart. But I think when I think about bravery or fearlessness, I mean, it's this fine dance, like this paradox of being like scared, like the willingness to be vulnerable and honest that you really are scared, because you can't be brave if you're not scared. It's not brave if it's not actually fear.
That's deep.
So
I'm thinking on this right now. You can't be brave if you're not scared. Yeah, there's got to be that contrast.
No.
You have to like feel fear and like move forward in spite of fear.
I can say unequivocally the thing that's made me most fearless is the fact that most of the stuff I do is on behalf of others. It's not about me. So
it's selfless. There's a piece of selflessness that allows you to be more bold.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
I'm saying, of course, I benefit. Of course, there's self-serving. Of course, I have my own agendas or whatever. But underneath my why, I'm trying to diminish suffering for someone else, or solve a problem for someone else, or bless someone's life.
But I think that's like, when you think about living a life of purpose and living a life of meaning, you've spent the majority of your life in that like sacred space. And it's just like, gotta be so fulfilling when you look back and say, I've worked on some stuff that's really cool. Like I've impacted the world in a meaningful way.
Thank you for saying that. It absolutely has brought me a lot of joy and purpose and meaning. And if I look back on my life, I'm like, oh, that mattered. That time, that energy, that creative energy, that hustle, the risk. Like it was in behalf of others. I had a moment, if you don't mind me sharing, of my first real epic failure, my real first face plant, if you will. And it was actually in 2010. So I had put on benefit concerts in my early career for charities that I cared about, and they were successful. And I got international awards. Like, for example, my first major music concert that I did for a charity, we were in college, and I was the president of a thing called the Rotaract Club. It was kind of like Rotary, but for college students. And my friend who was in the club at the time reminded me this is like, 20 years ago. She said, I think the year before you were the president, we sold oranges and we raised like $6,000 or something. And then you're like, we're going to have Ben Folds 5 at Leeds, lead a concert at the U of U, and we're going to raise money for clean water wells or whatever. And they were just like, yeah, sure, Lindsay. And then, lo and behold, we did it. It raised $100,000. And it was apparently like the most money raised in Rotaract. And so they flew me out. The Rotary International organization flew me out to Birmingham, England, and gave me some award. And I was
that the first time you knew, like, hey, I could be good at this?
Well, I think I thought the idea made sense. I was like, music is so unifying. People feel good. You have a captive audience that you can, they're all there to hear the musician. They're all there to feel good. And now you can espouse your cause and enroll people in something that matters, that has meaning, that has purpose.
Yeah.
It's a captive audience. So I realized leveraging entertainment, giving value first, and then being able to ask.
Fascinating. Yeah.
That was the first time I really realized that. But I came back, and my same friend, Sam Salisbury, that he had helped me produce that concert with Ben Folds. And we were like, let's do a music festival. And neither of us had ever done a music festival. We just were like trying to ascend and go bigger. Yeah. And so at Thanksgiving Point, we did this event called the Candlelight Serenade. And we had artists, this is going to date me, but like 311 and Third Eye Blind and Dashboard Confessional.
There's like some big names.
Yeah, it was at the day, in that day, they were well known. Most people listening out that are
still
young.
311, like, you know what I mean? Like,
those were
Dashboard Confessional. That was that was college for
remember
me,
that?
for sure.
Yeah, early 2000s. So anyway, this was 2010. So we put this music festival on, and we called it Candlelight Serenade because we were stripping back all of their, like, we made it acoustic. So these artists that people are used to hearing, they're now playing acoustic. Yeah. And anyway, to break even, we had to sell like 8,000 tickets, and we sold 5,000.
Oh, so it was a big loss.
Yeah. So the night of the concert, and I'd never worked harder on anything in my life, because when we saw the ticket sales not coming in, it was an absolute scramble. Yeah. And so, I mean, I was literally like peddling tickets in the streets. Like, it was just like embarrassing, but like just desperate to like try to get this thing.
How much did you lose?
$100,000. And so that night, and I was working for a charity that was combating human trafficking called Child Rescue. And I remember that night I had to go to the board because I was the executive director of the charity. And it was the first year of the organization, the first 10 months that this happened. And I think it was the first 6 months, actually. Yeah, 6 or 7 months into the organization. And everybody else had volunteered on this thing. I was the only person even being paid, And so you can imagine, I just was like unbelievably distraught.
And so sad.
We had $100,000 that had to go out to these vendors and some of the artists. And like the board had to step in and write checks. Like a friend of mine actually like came in and was like, look, he went and pulled cash out and was like, here, and paid. I literally went to an ATM and got cash for like $20,000 to like hand to one of the artists to make us whole. So now our charity was in debt. And the understanding was, you got to pay this back. So imagine a brand new startup nonprofit. I'm the only employee. We have $100,000 debt. So I was like utterly destroyed. And I came home after months of working so hard on this thing, and all these other things had been a success, and this thing was an epic failure. And I like fell prostrate on the ground in my living room. I hadn't seen my two little boys and my husband. They were all little guys. And I like what felt like 2 months. And I was like weeping, and just, it was like, I just was like, oh, who am I to have tried this? Like, I'm a failure. Like, these were sacred funds. All these people trusted me. They all went off a cliff. Like, I was just decimated. And I heard a voice like in my head, like I totally believe it was God, say, because it wasn't, when you hear those, sometimes those voices, they're just external to your own logic. It's someone talking to you.
Yeah.
And it said, pick yourself up, make things go right. This isn't about you. And so there was this really huge moment where I was like, oh, I thought I was being accountable. I thought I was looking at how I'd hurt everyone, but in the core of it, it was a self-loathing.
It was about you.
Yeah. I was like worried about what they thought of me and how I'd failed everyone. And it was just self-centered, So I went to bed that night, woke up the next morning, and I was feeding my little babies, baby food. And I'm sitting there going, I don't know how to make things go right. I don't even know what went wrong. I did the same thing I did at the other concerts and they made money, but this one failed. And I had this thought. I thought, well, I need a mentor, because if you don't know what you don't know, if it's the blind leading the blind, how can you get out? And so I actually Googled, what is the most successful music festival in history? I thought it would probably be Woodstock, and it was Coachella, which is still alive today. And I found out that Golden Voice were the producers of Coachella. And this guy named, there were two founders, a guy named Paul Tillett and then Bill Fold. Bill Fold, not to be confused with Ben Folds. But Bill Fold was not in any of the press. He wasn't in any interviews. And the Paul guy was kind of like the face of the company. And so I thought, probably that Bill guy's the operator, probably the integrator, probably getting everything done. He probably could give me better advice than the face of the company, and probably be more accessible, which is a great tip. Anyone listening, you want to get to somebody, get to the integrator and operator, because people usually aren't courting them. And so I cold called, I sent an email. I was like, hey, my name is Lindsay Hadley. I'm the stay-at-home mom. I put this concert on a concert. They were all successful. Then I did a festival and it was an epic failure. And I don't know, I need to help make things go right. I don't even know what I did wrong. I was just wondering if I could have 15 minutes of your time to ask you, like, a high level, like, what you think I did wrong this festival, because I have no idea. And he called me. I couldn't do anything for this guy. So the Michael Jordan of the thing I was trying to do called me and changed the trajectory of my life. To this day, he's one of my heroes and mentors. And he called me and said, tell me about the event. And I could do nothing for him. He gave me his time, ended up giving me an hour and a half on this call. And he says, did you only lost $100,000 your first year? He's like, that's remarkable for a music festival. And I was like, what? He's like, yeah, Lindsay, like 95% of music festivals lose money the first 3 years. We lost money the first 10 years at Coachella, but now we turn down $30 million a year in sponsorships. So they sell out. Coachella sells out 2 weekends of tickets, 75,000 people. So 150,000 tickets in, upwards of $400 in 1 hour without a mention of an artist. That's how successful Coachella is as a brand. And so he's sitting there explaining to me, like, you just didn't build a runway for loss for a couple of years. You're on a great track. Like, the event didn't continue. We didn't, like, it kind of was snake bit or whatever, but he just gave me this hope. And then he actually said, do you want to come down to Stagecoach? I'm setting up which is the country music version of Coachella at Indio Valley. And so I got on a plane and I was like, yes, I'll be there. And I showed up, and one of the perks of being an executive producer is you get your own golf cart, So he pulled up in a golf cart and had me jump in. And I'll never forget, he had this little Jack Russell Terrier that had a credential, like a all access pass. And his name was Mr. Rico. And I was like, did we just become best friends? So Bill ended up mentoring me and giving me advice on the next music festival I did, which raised $118 million for polio eradication, which was the cause we picked in that case in Australia. And that changed everything. And that we used some crazy radical different structures, but that's where it just totally shifted. But what was really cool is, his couple things I learned from that is, like, willingness to go to the best and just be like, just ask. Like, what would happen if I hadn't even asked, And the other thing is, I did a fundraiser to try to make up for the $100,000 loss in the charity. I did a charity poker night, and as a little Mormon lady, I was like, God, please forgive me for my sins, because I didn't know anything about poker and thought it was like a bad thing. So we had my friend knew some professional poker players, and we put on a charity poker night in LA, and no celebrities came. We invited a bunch of celebrities. No one came. The most famous guy was the guy who created Simpsons. That was kind of cool. He drew a little Homer on a napkin. That was dope. But, like, there was nobody really of any import there, like, that would really help the cause in a big way. But we raised $80,000 from the sales. And so we're, like, moving a dent, and none of them cared that it was going to debt. They just were there to play poker. And in the end of the event, my friend Malia, that I had met she's Dave Hunter's friend. I had met from the failure concert that was so terrible, the Candlelight Serenade. She brought Sumner Redstone, the billionaire and chairman of Viacom that owns a third of all of Hollywood. And he asked for the mic at my poker night. And he reached into the mic, pulled out a letter he'd written, and read his statement of why he wants to end human trafficking and why this should never happen to children. And then he announces his commitment to me and hands me a handwritten check for $1 million. And that was about 2 months after that failure event. That was just a crazy, epic gift, luck, lottery. Like, that's not normal. You don't usually have a failure and then immediate feedback loop of success.
So can I want to break this down?
Please, yeah.
So I'm going back to everything that you just said. And starting at the first one was being with friends that potentially had small vision. And it wasn't that they didn't execute on their plan. They, got peaches and sold them or whatever it was, and they made 6,000. They build a plan and they execute on the plan. Yeah. The problem was the plan wasn't big enough. And so that's like a really good lesson that I'm taking just from hearing your story is, number one, you have to dream big. You have no possibility of doing something big unless you start there.
That's right.
And so that's kind of one of the principles that I'm pulling out of this that I have seen in your life from a spectator, that I've always admired about you is how you level up and you dream way bigger than everybody else. And the threat of that is that you fail bigger.
Yes.
And so I'm going to the second one, which is you go all in and you send it and it comes up short.
Yeah.
And there's that desperation hustle at the end, and maybe even a bit of pride.
Totally.
That goes into saying, like, I've done it once, I can do it again, or it'll be just as easy.
Yeah.
And missing some of the intangibles.
Yeah.
But what I loved, a couple of things, that you owned it, that you're accountable for it. And then after you have a little cry, that you do pick yourself up. And I think about Tony Robbins. He talks about the difference between resources and resourcefulness. And his whole thesis is that resources are never the issue. That resources are all around us in kind of unlimited abundance.
I believe that.
But it's lack of resourcefulness that's the problem.
Yes, I believe that.
All of us know people that have all the resources in the world but don't do anything.
Right.
And then we also know people that have no resources or very minimal resources, but they're insanely resourceful.
Yeah.
And they get the resources.
Yeah.
And that's what, entrepreneurship is the gap between the resources that you control and the goal that you have. That's the entrepreneurial gap. And I'm listening to this story about you after you kind of talk to God and get a little pep talk.
Yeah.
And then, but to come up with the idea of saying, who's the best in the world? And I think this is like a really, really, really important point that anybody that I know that's excellent, that they do this, which is they find top 1% mentors or thought leaders or guides, and they take advice from the people that are world class, and everybody's willing to give you advice. The problem is that advice is irrelevant if they haven't done it. Yeah. For the most part, and sometimes the exact person with the best intentions isn't the actual person you should take advice from. Yeah. And this really insane insight that there's the show person and then there's the operator. And the operator is actually probably the one that I want to talk to and also going to be the most accessible.
Yeah, probably will give me time.
But I think all of those things are insanely resourceful. And I don't know if that's just natural for you to go through this process of saying, okay, who's the best, finding that it's Coachella. Yeah. Being resourceful, figuring out who the co-producers are, cold contacting, and even like that, like humility and saying, I'm a mom. Yeah. I screwed up and I want some advice, and just putting yourself out there. The last thing that I took from this story was poker night 2 months later, recoup the capital. Yeah. it wasn't like 6 months later or 12 months later or 2 years later. There's an element of just taking massive action that again is such a strength of yours.
Well,
that I think isn't normal for people of taking action.
I didn't think about that.
I'm listening to that story and I'm just seeing like these like principles of success that I'm like, you're living these in like a really big way. And the end result, like you just kind of casually said, hey, we raised $100 million for polio. That doesn't happen ever.
Well,
that's a top decile fundraise. And so you had to have found like perfect product market fit.
Yes. We came up with some really cool strategies, which I'd love to share.
Anyway, we should dive into that too.
I'd love to, but your feedback about like, oh, you took action. It's amazing. Thank you. I feel like you're giving me a lot of credit and maybe I need to take that in, but like, I just felt desperate as hell. I was just like, I just cared so much about the people that I had money to. I cared so much about my integrity because we now owed people money. But
desperate as hell or desperation hustle or whatever it is, like whatever gets you going.
Yeah, it worked in this case.
Is fuel.
And and the grace of God, like, I remember, I really do believe it is like works and grace. Like it's the paradox and the yin and the yang. Like, yeah, anybody who's been successful, it's like, you told me once you were deciding between going with Vivint or another company and that you made that pivotal decision. If you chose a different company, your trajectory of your life would have
tremendous
been
grace in that like crossroads.
Right.
Like we think back, Chelsea and I think back about that a lot.
Yeah.
About this fork in the road.
Right.
And literally talking to God.
Yeah.
Like fork in the road.
Which one?
Hearing getting direction, do this.
And you went with
and we followed it.
And you went with the Michael Jordan of the thing.
We did.
But you weren't sure yet. He wasn't yet.
But there was absolutely intervention. And I think that to me is grace.
Grace, right? Yep. So some of that's just blessings, luck. Like the fact that I'd met Malia through the first failed thing and then she was friends with Sumner is just crazy. And the fact that Sumner had never been pitched human trafficking and that he was in the state where he wanted to give. And just the combinations of it are impossible. But I had the privilege of knowing a really talented entrepreneur, Tony Hsieh, the founder of Zappos.
Of course.
And Tony wrote this amazing book called Delivering Happiness. And in it, he discusses the fact that Zappos actually did research on companies that were, quote, lucky. And they looked at these companies over time and they would see the, quote, like demarcations of like, that was an amazing break. Like the fact that you chose Vivint or, Sumner being there or whatever it is. And they looked at these lucky quotients. They tried to be as analytical and research-based as possible. And they found the companies that were successful and the companies that were failures didn't really have that many degrees over time of opportunities of luck. The difference was the ones that were prepared and resourceful when the luck came.
Took advantage of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were ready.
It's something, it's painful to hear when you're failing and you're not doing well, because then it feels like radical accountability. But no, it's a bit of both, because if you allow your failures to be a part of your ultimate success, right, that if you keep going or pivot,
and I think failure is kind of like a dangerous word. Mm-hmm. Because when people think failure, they think an end, that it's final. Mm-hmm. And a rephrasing of that's been really helpful for me. Again, it's going back to Tony Robbins, where he says there are no failures. There's only outcomes. And I think if you can step away from the emotion and the embarrassment or the shame and actually just say, hey, what's the outcome?
Yeah.
What's the action and what happened?
Yeah.
It allows us to be more scientific and more thoughtful.
Yeah.
To have different outcomes in the future. But if we define our identity as I'm a failure or I always do this, or then you kind of damn yourself or you limit your ability to go make a dent or try again in the future.
Yeah.
And so I think, getting a healthy relationship with failure and getting a healthy relationship with not achieving everything that you want to achieve and knowing that those are just steps on the journey to somewhere, trusting, having faith and trusting, I think matter a lot. And I've just noticed in your journey that you have a lot of trust, but you trust while you're moving your feet. You're kind of always moving forward. And I think that matters in a really big way.
Well, thanks. I mean, I do think you have to have an appetite for failure if you're going to try to win. It's just part of it. And if you come with that, like if you know it's going to hurt to work out, if you know it's going to hurt to not have, eat the food you want, if you know it's going to hurt to have high conflict conversations with people you love so you can get to resolution, if you know what I mean, if you're willing.
Tom Peters has this exceptional book. It's called The Excellence Dividend.
I've never read it.
I'll go, you have to read it.
I will.
I've probably read it 10 times. There's certain books.
Yes.
I'll read it and I'll be
Scripture.
done. This is like business scripture for sure.
Yes.
But he says the people and companies that try the most stuff win, and the people and companies that screw the most stuff up win. And there's an element of just the law of large numbers. And just if you try enough stuff, some of it's going to hit. And then along the way, you actually get this really relevant experience where you don't have to screw up the same things. You screw up new things.
Totally. And it's fun because, Casey, something I love what you're doing with the podcast and your platform where you're constantly teaching, inspiring, mentoring, sharing these business ideas. And, I think it's easy for people, well, that's easy for you to say you're here. Right now I'm eating garbage. Like you have arrived. So to espouse these principles of success. But the reality is there's research to back this. This isn't just like Pollyanna. That's what I love about Brene Brown. She gets into these best practices in interpersonal relationships around vulnerability. And it's not her opinion. It's not something she's saying like a cheerleader. She's backing it with research. So you can hit your head and your wallet.
And she's an exceptional teacher.
Yeah.
She's an exceptional communicator.
Great communicator.
Yeah.
So I can't remember where the study was, but I read this study that they looked at people who are, for example, grateful, that found or considered themselves lucky. That's what it was. They considered themselves lucky. We're going back to opportunity and luck. And they brought a cohort of people, and it was, basically a group that identified as lucky people. And then they had a cohort of people that were I'm not lucky, right? I'm really unlucky. And I have people in my life that that's what they say. Like, I'm always have bad luck, and this is their narrative. And then people are like, I feel really lucky.
Yeah.
And then they gave them a task, and it was, I don't know all the particulars, but they were using a periodical. It was like a made up newspaper. And they were supposed to count how many pictures you can see in the newspaper. It's 20 something pages, and they're as quick as they can and timing it. And they're flipping through the pages, trying to find the pictures. And at the end, the people write down how many pictures there are in the newspaper. And the unlucky cohort took on average 2 minutes longer than the lucky cohort. And they found out why. This will blow your mind. On the second page, it says there are 18 pictures in this newspaper in writing. The lucky people saw differently. They took things in their totality. They had a different paradigm. So there was a hack on page 2 telling them the answer, letting them finish the task 2 minutes sooner.
Wow. They were looking for it.
So there's an actual perception. They believe that in that study that the research indicated there's a correlation in your mindset. So you see the world differently.
But I've been, you study this stuff in scripture or in different literature, but over the last 5 or 6 years, I've been really putting a lot of time into meditation and priming and trying to really shape my identity and have language that's productive when I think about myself and when I think about who I am. And I think about the power of language, and even just what you're describing, lucky. There was somewhere along the line where when I communicate with Chelsea, I'll tell her just how lucky I am to be married to her. And it's amazing how I feel differently about my wife.
Right.
When I communicate, right. I am the luckiest person on earth.
You are. She's a babe.
She is a babe.
Nice
she's everything amazing. But when I communicate it, it reaffirms what I actually believe.
Totally.
And the other side of that is when I'm tired or when I'm fatigued or when we get in a fight and I start feeling sad for myself and listing out, injustices that I have in my marriage.
Yes.
It's not the same feeling towards this amazing woman. And it's a me thing. It's 100% a me thing. And so what you're describing of kind of this language or identity or really anticipating that good things are going to happen, like this level of optimism.
Yeah.
I think, there's a perception that you're naive or, you're not a realist if you're optimistic. And I just I hate that perception. I think it's harder to be an optimist than a pessimist. I think a pessimism gets way more credit than they deserve. Everybody can just say everything's, not going to work. But it takes somebody that's willing to really get in the arena.
Yeah.
To actually say, hey, we'll see.
Yeah. Holding hope can be painful, and it is brave to hold hope. So I love what you're saying.
Yeah.
And actually what you're talking about the stories we tell ourselves, that's why I decided to get into filmmaking. I think the most powerful thing we do as human beings is tell stories. I mean, our entire economy and the construct of money is just a story that we agree on. It's just a piece of paper that we tell each other a story about.
No, a lot of times it's not even paper anymore.
Right? So the stories we tell as a society, as individuals, especially the stories we tell ourselves, like what you're talking about, are so powerful. You got this adorable little, like hick drawl. I love it. It indicates I'm a small town girl too. And immediately people, coming from a small town, coming from, not a lot of entrepreneurial, financial, whatever, I know a little bit about your background. You told yourself a different story about what you were capable, what was possible, what you wanted to accomplish, and that is not normal too. I think I've watched you over the years and I'm like, what is it that makes Casey so successful? And I think it's your paradigm. I think it's your mindset. I think it's very evident, right?
Yeah.
And it's inspiring. I've learned a lot listening to you and watching you, and I'm so grateful that we're having this conversation. But, the reality is I've spent 10 years after putting in these music festivals and concerts. And, one of the levers, I'll just go back to this, is that we used some unique strategies to get top-down commitments from governments and ultra-high net worth people and corporations instead of relying upon ticket sales and merchandise and donations. We actually we'd gamify our events, and people would win tickets by signing a petition. And we use those petitions or those actions taken to get top-down commitments from government. So it was a constituency demonstration. And so we raised a lot more money by getting those with resources to make commitments on behalf of the masses. And as jaded as we get about politics, and I know we're in the middle of an election season, at the end of the day, we are their employers, and they work for us. We're the boss. So if you get enough people to say something to them, that you say jump and they'll say how high. And so,
what's insane to me is just how you lead. What you're describing is leadership. It's influence. And I'm like, one, it takes building a strategy, but then it takes people to follow. There's a big difference between I'm a leader and you just head off into the hills and you look back and there's no one there.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of the heartbreak that you're talking about with that music festival, where you kind of said, hey, we're going.
And then they follow.
You take this leap of faith and no one shows up. And I think that's the ultimate fear. That's why people don't get in the arena.
Yeah. Well, people, even worse, they followed me, volunteers and people's sponsorship monies and my board, right?
Yeah.
The ones who did follow me.
Yeah.
And we ended up, in trouble. But I wish I could take credit for the strategy of the Global Citizen Model, which I ended up being the executive producer and the chief development officer of this cool, it's like Live Aid of our generation. It's become a pretty household brand when it comes to charity and entertainment. And that changed the trajectory of my life. I grew up in a small town where the most, the high net worth person in our community before Mrs. Fields Cookies moved in town. Miss Debbie Fields moved into our neighborhood. Her kids went to school down at Waterford, but she lived up there and bought some land.
I didn't know that. I didn't know she was Salt Lake.
Yeah, her daughter was my best friend growing up. She was ultra wealthy and a total anomaly. But outside of that, the next wealthiest person in our town was our veterinarian.
Wow.
And so, we didn't have a doctor living in town. You had to go to Park City to get a doctor. There's no lawyers up there.
Which is a completely separate conversation.
Yeah.
Which, I'm going to jump way off topic.
That's all right.
I was with Kyle Reyes this morning.
Yeah, love him.
And we're talking about UVU and we're talking about entrepreneurship. And last night, Corbin Church had this event with iHub.
I was there.
I didn't see you there. Yeah. But Corbin has absolutely created something out of thin air.
I love Corbin.
That is just exploding right now.
What a rock star.
And you have BYU that's very involved, Utah State that had their entire leadership team. And you've got Kyle that these guys are like raising money to go build an entrepreneurship center. And I was talking to him and like, again, completely off topic, but you're talking about growing up in a place where there's one entrepreneur and there's a veterinarian that's making money. And that is not Utah today.
No.
And
very different
anyway,
landscape.
so completely like different track, but it's similar, which is like that culture that you're like, your journey has been an entrepreneurial journey.
For sure.
Like Harvard's definition of entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
Their actual definition.
Yeah.
Is the gap between resources that you want and resources currently controlled.
Yeah.
And like, that's the entrepreneurial gap.
Yeah.
And a good entrepreneur finds a way to bridge that gap. It could be education resources. It could be people resources. It could be financial.
Yeah.
And every single one of these things that you're talking about is an entrepreneurial venture where you identify something that you want. And then there's a gap of resources currently controlled. And you figure out how to get the resources and bridge the gap. And you that's where magic is created.
Right.
But going back to kind of what you were describing, you didn't have that growing up. You didn't have mentors or leaders or people sitting down and saying, hey, Lindsay, now's the time to, we're going to take you through the incubator where we can hold your hand and help you you just kind of jumped into the deep end.
Well, there wasn't a lot of wealth. There wasn't a lot of resources in our community. We had farmers and ranchers and, teachers, school teachers and local cops. And it just was we had one blinking red light in the whole town. It was just 100 kids in my grade. It was just small.
It was different.
But my dad was an entrepreneur, but he called it entrenched in manure. It was, there's feast and famine. He was almost always in famine. And so it didn't look very rewarding or exciting. Later he had some success, but in my childhood rearing years, it was just absolute, the relationships with money around me were not what they are today.
Yeah.
And I just genuinely, and also women, I saw no women with a career. My aunt was a therapist, a counselor, and she was the most career driven or career oriented person I knew. I had an aunt who drove a bus. I saw women as waitresses and secretaries and school teachers.
You didn't see them in leadership roles.
I never saw. I had no exposure to that. The Mrs. Fields cookies, and I met Debbie. She was the first woman I saw running a business, and it just blew my mind. It was such a huge. I was 14 when I really started having a relationship with her and her. But another thing is I grew up LDS, where that was in many ways looked down upon. It was you're failing your spiritual divine calling as a mother, or as a nurturer if you are pursuing those kinds of things. So I never had a paradigm that I'd ever do that.
Have you reconciled that? Because that feels like you've, and Jeff's also, obviously taken a big leadership role and saying, when you go send it, I'm going to go.
Yes.
And so you guys have, at different times kind of traded roles.
Yes.
But talk to me about, that. How have you managed because you're an amazing mom.
Oh, thank you.
So it's not about being an amazing
mom. But I wasn't in the traditional role, right?
But you've also made an incredible impact on the business world. And I think about it with Chelsea. Chelsea's doing her MBA right now at BYU.
Oh, cool. Good for her.
But she has this constant push and pull of we've got little kids at home and
conflict.
She wants to do everything. She wants to be, mom of the year but she also wants to go slay the dragon and take over the world. How have you managed those two?
It's a great
tensions
question and really fair. And it's been painfully and hard. It's hard work. It's hurt. It's not been easy. I felt a lot of mom guilt. I felt a lot of, I've been on so many panels, Casey, and they always ask the question. I've never seen a male cohort be ever asked. And I'm actually interested if anyone's ever asked you, how do you balance your work life and your family as a dad? How do you balance that with work? But I get asked that every time, right? And you're not asking that. You're asking how I balance the reconciliation of that come from. What I'm saying is there isn't the same expectation on men. It's isn't.
Way different. Yeah, like traditional gender roles are not that.
No.
You know what I mean? Like your traditional
we're breaking it up.
Gender roles are, And Chelsea and myself, we, for the most part, had traditional gender roles where Chelsea is absolutely like the CEO of our family.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I kind of
managing that,
do what she tells me to do.
Yes.
But she runs our house like a freaking boss.
Yes.
And for the most part, for me, it's been, you know, going out and making a living for our family.
Providing.
And, but that's, you know.
Which, by the way, like, I'm not saying, I think there's tremendous wisdom in that. I think there's deep spiritual truths in polarity. I think that you need these, you know, two pieces. They have to have that masculine, feminine energy. You have to have provision, provider, warrior energy with nurturing, right? I think we all have that energy, and you can play all the keys of the piano, but like, these are very big things that are new. We're coming into new territory as humans. It's not, you know, as we've gone out of the hunter-gatherer stage of human evolution and no longer need the stronger specimen, you know, to protect, literally, when most of the protection and provision is around more creativity and solution based as we've moved into industrial era and technology, and it's really shifting. And there is some real, by the way, like, I love Jordan Peterson a lot, and he talks about the multivariate analysis for why women are, you know, paid less, the gender pay gap, and it's brilliant. I mean, it's sad, but 10% of the factor is gender bias, like just men thinking she can't do as much, or she'll even have a baby, or I hire people that look like me, or I'm uncomfortable with it being a woman, whatever it is. I've definitely felt throughout my career at different times crazy underestimated by high-powered men, and I've been working with some of the most powerful men in the entire world, most high-profile, multi-billionaires, captains of industry, celebrities, people in the entertainment industry. I mean, this is cutthroat, major titans, and most of them don't care that I'm a woman. They just want to see the value I create. They are absolutely 0% asking what your race, your gender, your background is. They care about results, because at the end of the day, it's capitalism. And so I've not found much of the gender inequality stuff that people talk about.
I've seen some.
More in Utah. That is really ingrained in our culture. And I've had that a couple times where I'm like, oh, that guy's not even making eye contact with me. Oh, I walked in the room with my male business partner, and he talked to him and asked him, I'm actually that guy's boss, you know, like, or whatever, you know, so that happens. And like we talked about with Capita, we're pouring into women and seeing crazy results because they've been neglected. But that's because Utah's probably 20, 30 years behind on this and social issues. But like Utah is leading the nation for the lowest, for the biggest pay gap for women.
Utah's changing though too.
Yeah, but right now we are number one in the nation for the biggest pay gap per capita for women. Yeah,
so it's big.
It's big, but I love Jordan Peterson because you look at the research, you have to have all the information, and he explains that it's a multivariate analysis. It's actually the kind of jobs women choose to get into. Women do leave the workforce to have children. That pulls them out of the competition. Women tend to be more what he calls well-rounded, where they actually like want to have friends and hobbies, and they often are the caregivers of elderly family members. They tend to take care of family members that are struggling with mental health, pulling them out of their energy of achievement. Women tend to be more agreeable, and they're socialized to be more codependent and more agreeable, so they don't ask for raises, they don't negotiate raises, they don't ask for their value the way men do. And those ways of being and those factors all play into the gender pay gap, not just because people are biased.
That's really fascinating.
Yeah. So
I've never thought of it in that much of a nuanced way, but all of that stuff feels like common sense.
Common sense. When, you know what I mean? Yeah, like, makes sense. But what my experience has been is like, for me, just trying to reconcile that, going back to your question, is like, it's been a wrestle. At the end of the day, I don't care what I've accomplished on the outside. If my 3 little boys and my husband feel like I failed them, like that will be utter disaster to me. And so I don't think they know any different than a mom who's out slaying dragons. They've never had that. But how I came into that was by accident. Our situation wasn't intentional. We came into that. Jeff was a stockbroker and was making incredible money when we were first married. And then the 2008 crash happened.
Yeah.
And I stepped in the charity space to try to just supplement our income for a temporary, like, you know, help me And I always was going to be a stay-at-home mom. I literally had no paradigm for me to ever do anything. I remember when I went to college, I asked my dad what I should study, and he said, it doesn't matter. You're going to be a mom. Just do something you enjoy. So literally, that was my coaching. And so I that's what I thought would be happening. And then just the trajectory of my career went so crazy, and the income I could make relative to my husband, it made no sense for our family at a certain point. And I tried many times. I got job offers to work for the UN, move to New York, work for this billionaire and his foundation, but it would mean I had to leave my family every day. And I chose entrepreneurship where I could make my own job. So I could be home.
I think that's like a crazy, interesting insight. And potentially one of the ways that you've navigated things different than other women is choosing to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And I think the magic...
So I could be at home.
The magic with that is you actually get to dictate your own schedule.
Yes.
And I think about the roles that you're choosing, specifically with Capita, with, these different things. You can work from home. You kind of work your own schedule. You dictate.
Yes. I can make sure I'm there for the soccer game.
Yeah, which ultimately is the pitch of entrepreneurship.
Right. That's the value. You're married to it all the time, and it bleeds and it has other costs, but you can be the master of your domain in that sense. So that's what I picked the whole time. Yeah. So even at Global Citizen, I was not an employee. I was 1099. I was the chief development officer. So I was a senior executive, but technically not an employee. Yeah. And I literally didn't live in the office.
Which is kind of that nonprofit world, though.
Yeah.
Like
you can pull that off.
Where you have a gift, and I've found this in my career, is if you can sell, you can kind of write your own ticket.
You can work anywhere,
You literally can write your ticket wherever you want to go.
Yeah.
If you can create revenue. Yeah. If you can go like make it rain.
Yeah. It's
like
true.
That sales
That's total
skill
freedom.
is freedom.
Yeah. And crazy enough, I chose the place where they pay the least for that. I mean, in my career, I leveraged billions of dollars for causes that I cared about. I directly raised $40 million for my clients, and I never made more than like $500,000 a year. So
it's still real dollars though.
Totally. But I had to build an agency. I was working really hard. I had a team. I had to scale. I took a huge risk. That was the end.
For sure.
Beginning, it was like $75,000 a year, raising tens of millions of dollars.
Most of the time that world is a labor of love.
Yes. I wasn't getting compensated economically, but I did with purpose, and the network that I created was the best.
But for you to figure out actually how to make money in that world, you've got to be like a unicorn.
Well,
there's just not people that make money.
Truly. And quite frankly, the only person I knew that was making more than me in that sector that I was aware of was the CEO of the World Food Program, Governor Beasley, making like $375,000 a year, who they had a $10 billion a year budget, Casey. They're feeding 93 million people a day. So imagine a $10 billion budget, and you're getting paid $375,000 as the CEO of that. That's the nonprofit world, which is why I made my first movie, which is called Uncharitable, which is on a shameless plug on Amazon and Apple right now. And you can watch this documentary. Ed Norton's in it, and it features a lot of luminaries in the nonprofit space. And I came in to executive produce that because I saw Dan Pallotta's TED Talk called "The Way We Think of Charity is Dead Wrong." It's been seen by tens of millions of people. And it's interestingly, the CEO of TED, Chris Anderson's on camera in our documentary saying, right into the camera, that it's the most persuasive talk in the history of TED stages.
What?
So you got to check this out.
How have I not seen this?
It's amazing. And his whole thing is challenging the paradigm of demonizing overhead in nonprofit. The idea that we shouldn't pay people well, we shouldn't take risks, we shouldn't spend money on marketing.
Well, because it really is like, it's super tricky. You know what I mean? Like I'm in the world of like, we've created generational wealth at this point.
Mm-hmm. Congrats. I know.
And we're going
for you.
to a spot where we're thinking about how do we give and how do we give responsibly? Mm-hmm. And we haven't figured it out yet. Like we give kind of.
You're very generous. I love that about you.
But we're too broad right now. And we haven't gone deep enough on different things. And we're trying to go figure out how do we go deeper and how do we make a more meaningful impact.
Yeah.
But I look at that and I'm like, I don't want to go put a ton of money into something and have everybody go have big salaries and the dollars not actually get to. So there's this like crazy balance of like, how do you give in the most meaningful, impactful way? But also, how do you attract really exceptional people to go execute on that?
There you go.
And
so this is just basic entrepreneur thinking. So it's the idea of overhead being low, meaning that somehow indicates the charity's effectiveness will utterly betray you. And I'll give you a very simple example that you'll never forget. I could do a fundraiser for autism, something we both care about. We have loved ones who struggle with that. We understand and care about that. I could do a bake sale, and I could have, everybody volunteer, and they bring it in, and we go and have the cardboard cutouts, and we sell it at the street corner out here, and we raise $100 for autism, and for a program for a family to get the great care that you've been able to give your loved ones, and great. Oh my gosh, 0% overhead. Or I could put on a concert with Beyonce. It'll cost $5 million, but it'll raise 10. It's 50% overhead. Which would you prefer, Casey?
Yeah, which is like an obvious yes.
Yeah. So the utility of a percentage will utterly betray you. The question you have to ask.
We did this. Like I experienced this. We did this event called MW3, and you came out. You participated in this event.
Thank you for having me. That was awesome.
But internally, like we're amateurs. We don't know how to do it. We kind of
did a great job.
We follow your lead, we send it. But our number was a big number. It was a pretty big internal number. I think it cost us $1 million to put on the event.
Yeah. Wow.
And we're selling tickets.
Mm-hmm.
And really early on we realized we're not going to sell this thing out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we had some people that we respect in a big way coming and speaking.
Yeah.
And there was this decision about halfway through, which was, we're going to lose money either way.
Yeah. So what do we do?
One scenario, this place is packed. And the other one, it's like halfway full. We will not have like every seat. And so we ended up and, just filling it. And
brilliant.
But we went out and we raised $10 million for that was incredible. Primary Children's Hospital.
Yeah.
But internally we were having this crazy debate. Like, and where we settled on it was me and my partner paid like $700,000 out of pocket.
Yeah.
But it was like,
but you leveraged it to 10 million.
No, but I'm like, could we raise 9.3 million and have a break even event? And like, we're having this like, almost like moral dilemma internally of like, no, you can't take charitable dollars to pay for overhead. And so,
but would you do that? Is your decision you went sustainable? Are you going to write a $750 check every year?
That's my issue is we didn't do the second event,
which is exactly why.
Which is such a shame. It's a complete tragedy.
I would challenge your thinking.
No, it's like your point. I'm going back in my personal life and saying like, how sad is it that we didn't do number 2?
Yeah.
And we didn't raise another $10 million because I was like, I can't just write a $700,000 check a year for everybody to go have a sweet event like that.
Yeah.
Anyway, so what you're describing is like very relevant.
Well, at the core of it, Case, is basically people don't want people to be exploiting in the name of a cause and putting in their pocket, right?
Yeah.
So that's super fair. And you can find that out by not looking at a percentage. You have to look at like, what was your heart? What was the outcome? What was the value to the cause?
Yeah.
That should tell you the story. And so we know in the private sector that those are the most powerful levers you have. Hire the best talent. Spend money on marketing. You make money where you spend marketing, and you have to take risk. If you were to, for example, in the film industry, which I now produce and, executive produce TV shows and movies, like if, Waterworld was like a historic, colossal
dumpster fire, right? Yeah, it was bad.
And we didn't hear anything other than, that was a failure financially in the news. If a nonprofit took that kind of risk and failed, those people would be in jail.
For sure.
Okay, so why? Why is it okay there and not here? Why are we putting this is a fallacy that we challenge in the movie and that I am very passionate about, is if we can put someone on the cover of Forbes for making a violent video game, why can't we put the woman who ends domestic violence in a nonprofit?
Yeah.
So why are we afraid to pay people that are solving our greatest societal ills? If I told you today, give me $10 million, I'm going to build a house and a barn and I'm going to play in boats, but I will solve world hunger, would you have any problems? It's about the utility of the outcome.
No, it's fascinating because that what you're describing has got to be like the most massive trigger.
Yeah.
Like that is a controversial view.
I'm very bullish on it.
That I don't think you're ever going to get consensus.
Well, I think that the tension is that you have to have, Well, we already have in society. Guess what it's called? Social impact. Social impact entrepreneurship and social entrepreneurship. There's a bunch of people who are like, you know what? I want to make a difference. I'm just going to use business and capitalism to do it because this charity thing's so broken. If we look back into where it comes from our Puritan roots. We believe that you do charity to like pay off your sin, penance.
Yeah.
So like we're going to put you on a pedestal, and the people that do good, like the intrinsic good is enough. It's a wrong thinking. I want these societal ills solved.
I need to go watch this because
you do.
Like giving is something that, both of us share, this desire to kind of do it forever and do it in a meaningful way. And again, we're kind of going through this same process of figuring out how to give. It was interesting. I was watching this video on Warren Buffett, and Warren Buffett was talking about after he dies, and he's done the giving pledge, and he plans on giving generous. Most of his wealth to the Gates Foundation. And but he was talking about his foundation. He was saying, I don't want you to spread $1 million out to 30 different places. Like, I want you to go take big risks to try to solve big problems. Yes. And if you lose some money, like that's fine, but I want to go do these moonshots. I want to go like try to solve malaria. I want to go, and I think that's the type of vision that changes the world. Yeah. And I think the small conservative thinking, like it doesn't change the world.
Well, like you said, right? Like the lever of like, if you're afraid someone is not actually having impact and they're lining their own pockets, that's just called fraud and exploitation. Like, but you're smart enough, dude, to figure out if that's fraud and exploitation. Yeah. Like, that's really easy to spot. Like, you can see it. Like, some people lie or whatever, and it has happened. We have terrible examples of that in Utah of some famous nonprofits that have done that. But like, at the end of the day, they're the anomaly and outlier. Most nonprofits in the bell curve, like in human intention and character, most people are trying to do the right thing. Yeah. Right. But I'll tell you some crazy statistics. 95% of all nonprofits fell in the first 5 years. It's what's in the 70, low 60s in entrepreneurship. So it's significantly more. And, people are like, well, these people are greedy. These people in the nonprofit, why do they need more money? It's like, well, so these brilliant minds, these people that have incredible gifts, that have these passions, that want to do this, that want to solve this. Why don't they just go make a bunch of money in the private sector and then sit on the board of the poor SOBs getting paid nothing every year to go run the thing? Like, but not like, who do you think runs these programs? Who do you think the people are that do this, right? And I want to solve these problems. I don't want the cheapest available Band-Aid. I don't want I don't want people that are available at the price I can give them. I want the best available people to solve this problem. So it's all about utility. If you start looking at it more imaginatively and you rethink some of this, you can have incredible
everything you're saying makes
outcomes.
Sense, but it's
hard. It's emotional.
I'm going through my personal experience with it. Which was,
I wish you had gotten your money back so you would have done it again this year.
Me too. That was my argument. Yeah. And ultimately,
by the way,
the feedback
everybody would have been blessed.
We
the value
need to be beyond reproach.
Yeah.
I think ultimately that was the feedback.
But that would have been beyond reproach. Who would have been bothered that you?
It wasn't the consensus of the group, and ultimately, we chose to do it. Yeah. Love the event. Yeah. Smashed it.
There's a lot of value.
One of the things that I'm the most proud of ever, but the second one hasn't happened yet. And if you were to really boil down to why hasn't it happened, it's because I don't want to go write a $700,000 check.
So you just disincentivized the engine.
And so you took away the engine. So
there you go.
Yeah. So
watch this doc. And if you don't have time for the whole doc, I'll send you a link. You can watch it for free, but you just go watch the 13-minute TED Talk. And again, it's just a conversation that we need to be having. Yeah. But ultimately, like, that's what I'm doing now is like, I took that mechanism and that thinking. So my first film was, this documentary. And then I started making another documentary, and I was going and getting philanthropic dollars to make these documentaries. So I knew that in Hollywood, only about 12% of movies make money. Yeah. And I never wanted any of my friends' money to go to money movie heaven. So I was not going to raise investment for this. So I was like, I'm going to go to philanthropic people that have disposable income, that care about the message, and they're going to give it as a gift. And then if we make the movie, the value is the movie itself. But we as creatives owned the equity of the film, and it was a for-profit film, a for-profit engine. It was a production company. But the donors donated through a 501c3, and the 501c3 then put it into our program to make a for-profit movie. But documentaries generally don't make movies. And so there's an appetite for that. It's okay, about 90 cents to the dollar for the best documentary, like film funds.
Wow, it's that bad?
It's bad. So they're okay with it because no one's making money. Everyone feels good about it, like you just described, right? So I'm sitting there. I make this movie. We have a premiere. It's an Oscar contender. Ed Norton's in it. I'm like, this is so fun. And then nobody really saw it, right? Because it didn't make enough money to throw more P&A, which is print and advertising. The marketing dollars weren't there to generate exposure. I'm now trying to come up with new hacks with my entrepreneur brain for people to see it. Not because I want to make any money. I don't care about that. I just want the world to see it. I think the conversation's critical. But meanwhile, I start making another documentary, and I'm like 85% done with it. And I get asked by producers of Ben Affleck and Matt Damon are making this movie called Flash Before the Bang. And it's a true story of a high school running team in the 1980s that were deaf that won state. It's like Chariots of Fire meets Coda. And this is what's fun about it, Case. It's the first ever... It's historic. It's going to be historic in that it has more differently abled cast and crew than's ever been on set in a film. So the director's deaf, the lead producer's deaf, the scriptwriter's deaf, all of the actors are deaf that are deaf in real life. There's like 28 people that were deaf on set of our film. And so we went and filmed it up in Portland, Oregon, where it took place in the Oregon School for the Deaf. And Kevin James is the lead in it, and Matt and Ben are executive producing, and they asked me to come executive produce it with them. And I was like, I'd love to come produce this. Wow. And I said, I don't want to take anyone's investment. I'm afraid of losing my friend's money. That just makes me want to throw up. And they were like, all right, well, can you do the charity thing then? Can you do what you did with your docs? And I was like, is that legal? Can we do that? And of course it was. I looked into it like 10 minutes and it was like, yeah, of course it's legal. It's no different. It's a for-profit. It's just this one will make money. And so, or potentially, or have better actors, or be seen by more people, or have bigger names attached. And so I was like, oh. So I went and was able to get Jim and Krista Sorensen, who actually made their wealth, interesting enough, from technology that we all use that's FaceTime. They invented it because he had a brother-in-law who was deaf. And Jim made most of his independent wealth from his generational wealth from inventing technology that benefited the deaf community. So out of their foundation, they write a check and help executive produce this movie. We make this movie. It's going to be done. It'll be out next year. But I'm like, well, that was fun. I made a big boy movie. And like, I'm just sitting back like, well, that's cool. I leveraged philanthropic dollars. And Jim and Krista, they're not expecting any return. They just want the movie to get made. And they want the gift to the community and the conversation. And I get a phone call from Leonardo DiCaprio's production company called Appian Way. And they said, hey, can you do that again, but this time for a $60 million television series that's starring Kevin Costner and Will Smith and Melissa McCarthy about the UN? And I'm like, what? Like, my paradigm is like, is this okay? Can we take a bunch of nonprofit money and then pay these Goliath entertainers to make a film? And it hits me. I sit on my couch, Casey, and I was like, hold on, this is literally the premise of my documentary and the thing I believe. I'm like, wait a minute. The movie Taken did more than all the documentaries combined for anti-trafficking. The movie Blood Diamond did more than all the docs combined for ethical supply chain. And you'd look at like Aaron Brockovich, more than all the docs about corrupt America and corporate America practices. I look at the movie Lion. It's like way more than all the docs about vulnerable children and orphans in India. People see these movies when...
I mean, what you're describing is like, it sounds like common sense.
Yeah.
But it's profound that you identified it because no one else is...
Nobody'd ever done
anybody else who's doing this.
Nobody's done it until now.
And it makes complete sense to me. So I'm talking to Corbin. And he's creating iHub. It's this tech incubator as a nonprofit. And they're going to have a fund that invests in all of these startups.
And then it perpetually comes back.
The carried interest, which is, every private equity firm, every fund has their carried interest. That carried interest comes back to the nonprofit
and stays
and continues to fund this perpetual. So it's taking this proven for-profit business, one of the best business models in the world. In kind of carried interest and kind of private equity. And it's saying we're going to go like perpetually endow this philanthropic, tech incubator, and kind of what you're describing is the exact same thing, which is saying like, we're going to go do movies. And not only are we going to do them, we're going to do them with the A-list stars and stuff. Best
storytellers in the world. Best filmmakers.
Yeah, stuff that people will want to go see.
Yeah.
Like for profit, they'd watch it just because it's so entertaining.
Exactly.
But have the profits from that go feed the machine that continues to do more things. And so it makes like complete sense to me. I'm a documentary buff. Like
I like them too.
When I have like free time, I love diving into them, and they're fascinating. But they're not hits. Like they don't make money.
And most people are not like us. Most people aren't like, crazy junkies of self-actualization and read all the self-help books and watch all the educational movies. Most people just want to check out when they're doing entertainment, and they want to be entertained. And
but you're describing every one of those movies. I've seen every one of those movies.
Right.
And I loved them.
Yeah.
Love Blood Diamond.
Yeah.
I loved Schindler's List. I loved Aaron Brockovich. I loved
Hotel Rwanda.
Yeah, Lion.
Yeah.
Hotel Rwanda. I mean, those are like the ones that like pull on your heartstrings, you know, like they completely get you, but they're insanely entertaining.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so you pull like Taken, like who doesn't like that movie? Like,
yeah, it changed the world. I mean, people didn't even know about human trafficking until that movie came out. And I'll tell you, like, what's fun, Casey, is we're not the first to leverage philanthropic dollars for films. They've been doing that since before I was born in documentaries, as I mentioned, because everyone has an appetite because everyone's poor there. So for some reason, that's okay. But that makes no sense. If you have a limited amount of resources to make an impact and you want people to...
Why wouldn't you put it in the
why wouldn't you put it to where
use?
they most use and where it's commercially viable so more people see it?
I mean,
it's about impact.
Honestly, like we gave a lot of money and raised a lot of money for autism. And where I got discouraged was for a kid to go do ABA therapy and do a lot of this stuff. It's 50, 60K, 70K a year per kid.
Yeah.
So we're going out and raising money, and it's helping 2 kids. And I'm like, this is completely unsustainable.
It's discouraging.
And I, it feels like I'm like picking up starfish and throwing them in the ocean. Like I'm not making a dent.
Yeah.
And ultimately we end up shifting where we ended up donating to UVU to build their autism center.
Yeah.
So that they could train people to go
field.
Give their life to work in autism, when he felt like that was a more sustainable use of dollars, that it could continue to pay out. And what you're describing, if I was donating to that industry, I would donate to the one that makes money.
Yeah. Right.
Because the chances of my dollars continuing to live on.
Yeah.
Like if you lose money, like that's a one-time event, and it's,
Well, you're not alone. So what we're finding is this is an idea whose time has come. I mean, the television show The Chosen. So again, people have done this one-off. Like this is starting to be a thing. Yeah. They did $200 million in revenue, and 70% came from donors.
So I saw something in the Wall Street Journal just barely, just 2 days ago.
Just yesterday.
That was talking about religious films and how there's tons of money pouring into religious films.
Exactly, yeah.
Because they're like for the longest time, like
Hollywood wouldn't make them.
They've just been trashed too. Yeah. Like you don't have great production.
No
you don't
money.
Have great actors. And so you like go tell the story of Jesus in like a
with very poor,
terrible way. And it's like you don't do it justice, where like, for me, I watched The Chosen and I'm crying the whole time.
Yeah.
Like every time.
Yeah.
And they did something where they capture the essence of Jesus, and they capture the love.
Yeah. But they were ultimately able to unlock the resources.
Yeah.
Like going back to the entrepreneur, 200 million, 70% was a gift from donors. I mean, think about that, Casey. Like that thing was made because people just wanted to see it, and they gave the money to them to do it. The value of seeing it. So this is like, right now they just had the movie Cabrini come out. It was a $40 million budget that a philanthropist wrote a check for, because it's a story about, the woman who was Mother Teresa was her protege. She was like the previous to, she's, the precursor to Mother Teresa, and as a Catholic nun, incredible story. There was Just Mercy was offset by philanthropic dollars. So people are starting to have an appetite for it.
I didn't know that was philanthropic.
Yeah, some part was offset by it.
I love that movie.
So some of these films have been offset, but these are narrative and scripted and now television. And this is an idea to come. We are the first at Harbor Fund to build it into a 501c3 fund and have it venture capital shaped, except for all of the return. There were no LPs, unlike you mentioned Corbyn's structure. All of the money comes back to the fund.
Yeah, it's
not
insane.
The principal and the carry all comes back. And so when people give,
but what's interesting with Corbyn's, and the reason that I love it so much, it's not that I don't love this other option, but the reason that I love it with Corbyn's is I see a tremendous amount of sustainability.
Sure.
I am a hardcore capitalist.
Yeah, totally.
And if I have two options, and one option is give your money away forever.
Yeah.
And the other option is go make a nice return on your money.
Yeah.
And it helps perpetuate entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
At least at this stage in my life, there will come a point where we just give it all away.
Yeah.
But at this stage in my life, I want to grow it.
So
you know what I mean?
Yeah. So what you're saying there, couldn't agree with you more. So I'm going to the Caseys that are giving it all away at the end of their life for what I'm doing. And people are doing this all the time. They're giving their names on a building at
my idea for you is you don't need to just do that.
Well, that's a good idea. That's something to think about.
You could add a second arm.
That's a great idea.
To your fund.
Yeah.
And you could have a for-profit.
That's a cool idea.
Arm, and
something to think about.
And go give the profit back and take the carry.
Right now, though, we're kind of focusing on a specific type of philanthropist. Like if you go back, people buy art all the time and donate it to museums, and we all get to enjoy it as the world.
Yeah.
People put their names on buildings, and we all get to use it at the university.
Fascinating.
Those are the people. They're getting their names. They're going to be executive producers of literally the most powerful amplifying moments in our culture, because film and cinema, as much as anybody can trash talk Hollywood, they are the kings and queens of our culture.
Yeah.
And there's a reason that we pay attention to them, and they get paid $20 million a post, and they're
all
attached.
This stuff. You're literally blowing my mind today. I had no idea we were going to go on some of these topics. So another place where my head's going. So my brother-in-law, I get Chelsea's cousin.
Okay.
Got awarded the opportunity to write the music for the Broadway musical, The Outsiders.
Oh, cool.
So he writes the music, him and his partner. They're ready to launch kind of off Broadway.
Okay.
And COVID hits.
Oh.
And that cast, the nature of that cast, it's a young cast. It's high school kids, that are going through that process. So they missed the window. And so they had to go recast the entire thing. They, launch, I think it was in Palm Springs, and Angelina Jolie gets infatuated with it.
Fun.
So she gets behind it. They get on Broadway. But my Chelsea's cousin calls us and says, hey, they need, a couple $1 million more.
Yeah.
Can you put some money in? And I'm looking at this being like, I'm losing my money. For sure, I'm losing my money. But they were far enough. They were at least on Broadway. They had and they end up going and smashing it. They win Best Musical. They win 16, 13 Tonys or something.
Incredible.
But me and Chelsea get a Tony Award.
Yeah.
As co-producers.
There you go.
And it shouldn't matter.
It's kind of fun.
But it does matter.
It's fun.
And that's my experience with having my name.
Right.
And this one ended up we'll end up making some money on this deal.
I didn't even know that story.
But the naming matters, and being able to be a part of that journey, there's social benefits that come with it outside of a capital return.
So right now, all my films, in our slate, have A-list celebrities attached. We're making shows with, the creators of Napoleon Dynamite, Nacho Libre. We're making shows with Leonardo DiCaprio. We're making shows with Matt and Ben. We're making shows with titans of this industry, and they're fun, and they're all meaningful. And you might be really passionate about the one about Down syndrome. You might be really passionate about the one about the United Nations. You might really care about the one about vulnerable children. You might care about the one about, we're making a movie called Hershey. It's the true story of Milton Hershey, the real Willy Wonka. And, right now we're negotiating one of the biggest actors in the world. I can't mention their name yet. We're making a we're in the middle of closing a deal of a film that will likely be in the top grossing films in cinematic history. And they're letting me in on these deals. Casey, the Hershey movie, just to tell you, Hershey is getting behind it the way Mattel did Barbie. And everyone will know about this movie. And they let me in on it. It was a $47 million budget. And they were fully funded. They didn't need my money. And I called the producer and I told her about my fund. And basically she was like, why wouldn't I let you in on this? You are a future wealth for me as a creative. Everybody else's money goes back to Hershey shareholders. They buy yachts and cars. You are a future wealth for me. I want you in on this. And she peeled back.
How rad is that?
She peeled back room for me on the cap table. I'm getting in on a deal that right now will be an absolute portfolio maker for our fund. And we're 3 months in. We've raised $3.5 million.
Let's go.
My board is probably one of the most impressive boards I've ever amassed or been a part of. We have the director of Wonder Woman, Patty Jenkins, Mark Burnett, who's the most successful and undeniable prolific producer in Hollywood history. He did Survivor, The Voice, he did Shark Tank, he did, Apprentice. I mean, this guy's a legend. We have Geraldine Dreyfus, who's the queen of impact documentary. She's done over 200 documentaries and won more Oscars than anybody I know. She's amazing. We have some of the best entrepreneurs, Jeff Hoffman, the founder of Priceline.com and Bookings.com. We have actor Jared Butler and Katie Couric, the journalist. So really undeniable people and social proof. And we're a couple months in. And I pitched Richard Branson. I said, hey, do you want to join the board? And Sir Richard Branson said, I'm trying to be a good grandpa. I don't want to join any boards, but I'll let you use my island and I'll let you put on the first ever film festival here. And you can feature your slate of films. It'll be like a demo day. It's not a real film festival because outsiders aren't getting in. It's just our slate of films. And we're selling tickets for $100,000 a person. We've been selling those out like hotcakes because all those names I mentioned are going to be there and the people in the films. And so you get 4 days on Necker Island with Sir Richard Branson. You're eating sushi and playing pickleball and sitting in the hot tub, and you're getting to help be a part of some of the most powerful creatives in the world who are going to tell the stories that will last through generations. You and I both love that guy, Jesus, from 2,000 years ago, and he told stories that have lasted through millennia, these parables that change us. And that's what we're building. So you should come join.
No,
you want an Oscar now?
You're
to match your Tony?
Powerhouse. All of this stuff. I love people that dream big.
Thanks, man.
And I've known you for 20 years.
Yeah, you have.
And you've always dreamed big. But I'm so impressed with just what you're doing.
Thank you.
You're making such a big impact, and it fires me up.
Thanks,
it
man.
really does get me.
Thanks, man.
Get me motivated.
Let's put an Oscar next to your Tony up on the shelf.
That'd be the biggest flex if I had an Oscar and a Tony. I'm 100% adding my Tony to my LinkedIn.
So you're coming to Necker Island. Okay. You guys heard it.
All right. Hey, you know how to get me to Necker Island. This is we were just talking about this before when we started filming.
Yeah.
There's one road.
Yeah.
And you know exactly what that is.
Oh.
And it's not me. It's my wife. You've got one decision maker and that thing's done. So
that'll be fun. Well, no, genuinely, listen.
You're talking to the wrong person.
I feel super grateful. In all sincerity, I feel like it's an idea whose time has come. I feel very humbled and grateful to try to be the steward of this idea. And I'm so blown away.
No, you're going to smash.
I'm so blown away with the people coming around.
I'm so 100% convinced.
Thanks, man.
That everything you've done up until this point has prepped you for this moment.
Thank you. I do feel
the
that
failures,
in my core.
The successes, the organizing people, the events, the creativity. What I admire as I'm listening to this and is you're insanely creative on how you bring people together. You anticipate human needs.
Thank you for saying that.
And what motivates people and what draws from people. And part of it is these altruistic desires, and part of it is these capitalistic, I want to make some money.
Yeah, and have fun.
And if you can find a way to check those boxes for different people, different customers.
Yeah.
But then also do it in a way that you create magic, you create experiences that people couldn't,
Thanks for seeing that.
No, it's fantastic.
Well, everybody wins in our model. We call it Harbor because it's like a rising tide, all the boats coming up in the harbor, right? Like the celebrities get funding for their projects, their pet projects. They don't have to deal with studios and a few executives who make all the decisions.
No, if I'm a celebrity, I'm like, this is the funding I want. I've got
and then it makes money. I can go back to
I've got a friendly partner that this thing can like
align with me. It's a love letter to the creatives.
Oh, it's
and
fantastic.
The actors. So then the actors are in, so we're getting deals that we have no business getting. It's insane. When I tell you off camera, some of them you'll be pumped. So we've aligned with them. So the creatives and the talent want us. The benefactors are getting the value of no risk. There's no mispromises. I'm not going to do Hollywood swindling and make you stupid money. I'm going to say you're never getting your money back.
Yeah.
Your name's going to be on there. You get to be in the premiere. Your kid can be an extra. You could come on Necker Island. All these fun other perks that
Which
are
matters
valued.
to people.
Totally.
Yeah.
But like that's not your intrinsic value you're giving is a gift to the world. You know, you're giving a story to the world that matters. And if you believe in that, then this is for you. And then the other part is that we've incentivized ourselves because in the long term, you build a fund where all the carry and the principal comes back. It can really amass quickly.
Yeah.
And so we can pay ourselves decent salaries and have a great lifestyle and have incredible impact. That's the idea.
It fires me up.
Thanks, man. Thanks.
Before we finish up, this is one that I always like to finish with. And I know that it's been important to you. Talk to me about faith. Talk to me about kind of your personal faith, and specifically when you navigate worlds that are different than your world. You know, you're navigating worlds with people that are agnostic, people that are atheist, people that have all sorts of different faiths all over the world.
Yeah.
One, how has your faith guided you through life?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. It's everything. It's literally at the core. I mean, I even went through a terrible deconstruction and a dark night of the soul that led to some severe depression on my faith journey. I went through the losing of my faith, I'll call it. But I realize now that you can have an affliction of doubt, an affliction on your faith, just like you can get hit by a bus or get cancer. Like some people, that's their test. For me, it was a crucible and a refiner's fire and brought me way closer to God. I had to break down everything. My religion had to become undone so I could build a real relationship with deity and myself. I'm beyond grateful for what's happened.
What was the catalyst to that? Like, is it too intimate or too personal?
I mean, it was like a death by 1,000 cuts. I just basically had like my life fall out like a wet Dixie cup. I had failure in my business, a business partner who's, essentially mismanaging, essentially embezzling money. I had relationships failures. I had exhaustion. I was working too many hours and not getting paid. I had loved ones pass away, and I had everything I own in the world stolen. So it was the effect of like a fire.
What's the timing on this?
This was in 2015.
Okay.
Yeah. So I had this year from utter hell, and it was getting kind of Job-like for me. I was really suffering, really struggling, and high functioning anxiety became high functioning depression. And I was just really hurting. And one of the features of depression is despondence and a lack of hope, and hope and faith are made of the same stuff, So I ended up being really questioning, like, is God there? And quite frankly, I'd had a pretty charmed life, and I'm not trying to whine about it, but we had everything we owned stolen. We put all of our belongings in storage to go be with a dying brother-in-law, and someone stole it all. So it was like our house burning down. I mean, my photos, my journals, my heirlooms, everything I had was gone, and I had to start over. And all of those things coming in at once, I was like, okay, like this suffering, this thing that the greatest minds of all time have wrestled with, the nature of God and why does he allow such evil and suffering in the world, right? And I'm just getting a taste of it.
Yeah.
Like I help people get out of human trafficking. I help mothers try to find, in my career, I've been front lines of mothers trying to find lost children that were chopped up. I mean, horrific stuff I've seen and been a part of and been witness to and privy to, but I'm not the one in the arena. I'm in the stands, in the stadium trying to help. But I'm like, if I'm in this much pain and I'm not burying my spouse, and I'm in this much pain and I'm not being human trafficked or whatever it is, how, like, the nature of God, why, how is that real? And I just had that journey of like, is this a real thing? Is this possible? And I found, for me, I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy, the affliction of doubt that I had, because it was way more painful than all the external stuff around me. I felt like, in speaking of movies, remember in Castaway when he's like Wilson, and,
of course.
I felt my faith leave me, and it was very, very, very painful. I didn't choose it.
That's so lonely.
I didn't choose it, yeah. But I had this little tiny speck, this little tiny hope that maybe maybe. And I sought after it tooth and nail. And at the time, I remember praying and being like, God, if you're there, I just need to know you're there and I love you. You can take my kids from me. I literally like consecrated. I had this prayer. I remember where I was. I remember it was 2 a.m. I was up with tons of anxiety and depression. I was bawling my eyes out. And I was like, what's happening? I was living in my parents' basement because we had just lost everything. I had, wholesale fallout relationship. I had reputation damage because the falling outs and people say what they say about you and your, I realized that your character is different than your relationship. Character is who you are. But in all this, I ended up having this moment where I was like, God, are you there? If you let me know you're there and you love me, I'll go through anything. You can take everything. Put me in a wheelchair. Just finish the Job story. I'll do it. But I just need to know you're there and you love me. And I felt the heavens were brass. I felt nothing. And at the time I thought it probably feels better that he's not there than to think he doesn't love me enough to respond to that, or that I'm not worthy of it. Those two were so much more tenable, less tenable. So it was like, there's probably no God. And I sat in that for a while, this lack of this despair. But actually I realized later that God needed me to have a total deconstruction so that I would go out and seek grace and healing. Yeah. Because what I ended up building was a tribe of literally miracle healers. I sought out healing more than anyone I've ever seen. I don't think I've ever seen anyone pursue healing as hard as I did. Like I went everywhere, tried almost everything. I didn't ever do like the plant medicine stuff, but I just went, which was super on deck. I'm not against that. I just didn't feel called to that, but I was considering it. But I tried everything. I did all different modalities, went to different people, threw money at it, like hustle. I'm a doer, right? So it was a full send into my healing. Yeah. And in it, slowly the sun rose. But where I found the ultimate healing was in Jesus, this perfect embodiment of love. And I'd been paying lip service to grace. I did not understand grace. I think that our culture we come up from, it really sometimes gets that wrong. Like we misunderstand that. We think we have to be worthy to unlock the grace of God. And so that's an oxymoron. I ended up building a relationship and then God ended up revealing himself to me like I never imagined. I full-blown had like a full-blown scriptural level like vision. I actually had like an encounter with God that was metaphysical that I would rather die than ever deny. And I know he's there and he loves us. Yeah. But it took 7 years to get that. And for whatever reason, I had these 7 years. So this is
just recent. This is just last couple of years.
The sun rose and I had faith and started believing in Jesus and all this, but I had like a demarcation where it's like, I know.
And where's Jeff at in this whole process? Like, is he just like...
Yeah, he's in his own journey.
Coming on the journey with you?
Yeah, he's been on the journey and he's actually in his moment of wrestling, trying to get where he's going with that, but he's always just loved and supported me.
Yeah, I've always felt that from him.
He's an incredible spouse. He's cherished me in a way that I'm very undeserving of, but I'm so grateful of.
So one, I'm listening to your story and I'm sad that I didn't know any of that.
I hit it. I probably hit it.
Yeah, you probably.
Yeah. It's classic. You just like cry yourself to sleep. But
no, I'm sad that we weren't better friends.
I know.
For you in that
Thank you
moment.
For saying that. You know what? You've been a great friend to me. And this is such a gift to come and talk with you and share my heart, share my story. But I know this is what I learned is that when that moment where I felt God was abandoning me.
Yeah.
He actually was like a father. There's the importune scripture from the New Testament where it says, if you asked a father for a loaf of bread, would he give you a rock?
Yeah.
If you asked for a fish, would he give you a serpent? Well, if you are such a good parent that you would never do that, what do you think I would do? His answer by not answering me in that moment was because he knew
that's what you needed.
Who I would go collect.
Yeah.
The tribe that I'm now working with now in my life, building what I'm doing now, the human beings that are blessing all the people around me, that are healing people, miracle healings. And my faith, I rendered an entirely new faith. And it took me being in that shadow and that darkness and deconstructing. My religion had to come undone, so to speak. I'm still an active LDS person. I still participate. I see my religion as a modality to the relationship. It's just a vehicle to the relationship with God. And that doesn't have me anymore. Whatever people think and say like doesn't dictate my behavior. But I ultimately did have like a perfect knowledge, so to speak, of this unconditional love from God.
You knew.
Yeah, later.
Yeah.
But it took time. And I wouldn't do it any other way. It was the most romantic, beautiful story. Speaking of good stories, he's the best storyteller of all time.
So 2 things before we finish up. The first one, I'm thinking of this Michael Bloomberg story where it's in a Scott Galloway book. And I listened to this and it hit me so hard. Where he said, when my friends have success, I don't call them or I don't go to their success party. Mm-hmm. But when I have a friend that fails, I call them that day and I take them. Oh. Makes me emotional just thinking about it. I don't know why it hit me so hard. But he said I'd take them to the most public place and have dinner.
That's
and
beautiful.
And let everybody let everybody know that I'm with them.
Yes.
And
that is Jesus.
And I was thinking about that.
That is love.
When I was thinking about kind of that low moment that you went through and thinking, man, you probably really valued friends that just loved you. Yeah. Just knew who you were. Yeah. And my experience with reputation is that there's always noise. You're going to go through patches, where things don't go as planned.
Yeah, totally.
But over time, it always works out the way it needs to work out. And people know your character. And over time,
who you are.
Over time, it just kind of, and what you're describing of going through this low moment, I never heard about any of that. Oh. But I see you now and see you shining now. Oh, and obviously it didn't hold you down. It wasn't the difference between your career working or not working. The second thing that I'd be remiss if I didn't ask is, who is that tribe?
Yeah.
And go into those people and that healing, because I think a lot of people are in those low moments and potentially don't have the same proactivity that you have.
Like, oh my gosh.
I think you have a gift of
finding resources,
being very resourceful and taking massive action. And so maybe if you were to give advice to somebody that's in that low spot, how did you find a support group, and who are they and why are they important to you?
This is my honor to talk about this. And if I can share these, I try to share these people with everyone or everywhere I go. First of all is Jesus, and literally everything he embodies, and him as a real entity, actually really having a relationship, just like we're sitting here talking, like dive in. It's crazy. Just go all in, just do it. I promise you, he's real. And, oh man, it's he's the coolest. He's everything. And then secondly, are people who are trying to embody or be like him in any way. But for me, my husband was obviously just a total, an angel in my life. But it was people that had real gifts of healing. My friend Freddie Bosch, who I now is a co-founder of my film fund with me, who's an actor and a creative. He's a healer. He was doing he was first line, responder, doing CPR on me, so to speak, spiritually and emotionally. My friend Henry Amar, he does incredible, what's called neurolinguistics reprogramming. He's tremendously gifted. You would miss that because he's got this pop, bleached hair and this pop energy, and you would just totally miss that he is an absolute miracle worker.
Wow.
EMDR therapy. I worked with a woman named Becky Anderson, who that was really, really helpful. That's incredible.
And what is that?
But basically your brain, the hemispheres of your brain, you actually follow a light or a finger, and then you go back to traumatic moments or painful moments. And then, basically your brain actually can process it across hemispheres. Wow. And you can let go of the triggers and traumas. You don't have to believe in it. It's like antibiotics. You do not have to believe in it. It works. You can go check it out. Some of the greatest research right now out of Harvard and Yale for EMDR. It's a remarkable modality. I read everything I could about codependency. That was my particular prognosis, my particular problem, and all those insecurities. And there's a book called Whole Again by Jackson McKenzie that is like scripture to me. I really believe the word of God in Mormon scripture, it talks about the iron rod, is the word of God to you, Casey, and the word of God to me, Lindsay, which could be in a song, a poem, a podcast.
Fascinating.
I think it's God's word to you. And it could be in scripture. It can be from the pulpit.
That resonates so loudly with me. I've got thought leaders in my life, whether it's the Stephen Coveys or the Tony Robbins or the Clayton Christensens or the Tom Peters, the Peter Druckers, they just call to my heart.
Yeah, exactly.
They bring out the best in me.
And if you hold on to that, it'll take you to the everlasting.
Brian Tracy's. And these aren't some of them are, share similar faith. Most of them don't. but they speak truth. And I think it allows me to kind of build a philosophy on how I see the world.
Yeah.
Kind of taking the best from these different thought leaders. And so, you know, when what you're saying there like resonates with me a lot. You know, some of the most impactful teachers that I've ever had have been business professionals and, you know, but they're teaching truth. They're teaching like
the
principles.
Truth, and the truth sets you free. And all the gospel literally means in Hebrew, good news, you know? So it's just like, is it good news to your soul? You follow that.
Fascinating.
And that takes you to the everlasting love of God. So, you know, I really loved Brene Brown's work. I've loved,
how good is she?
Amazing. I love her, all her books, everything. And my friend Phil Zahn, he's one of my very best friends. He was this radical pastor, totally tattooed. He has all the New Testament tattooed on his arm, an evangelical or non-denominational Christian pastor. You could put him in that ilk, but he's just a crazy.
You have a lot of best friends.
Yeah, though. I do. He's a crazy, reckless follower of Jesus. And he helped bring me to him in a new way. So utterly saved my life, saved my spiritual life, saved my actual life, these guys. And then, you know, there was a mentor who'd passed away during COVID, who was my Gandalf and Yoda and Dumbledore wrapped into one. His name was Joe Ritchie. And Joe had grown up in a very legalistic, very intense Christian fundamentalist group where they couldn't watch movies and music. You couldn't kiss, tell your altar. You couldn't, you know, women had to wear dresses and no makeup, like very intense, biblically fundamentalist Christian group. And he describes getting out of prison and learning about grace. And he walked me through getting out of prison. So he helped me see that my life is a thank you note. And then I'm not trying to earn the grace of God. I'm not trying to earn heaven. That it's an absolute free gift, this love. It's unconditional. There's nothing you can do to ever not be worthy of it. Like God will always be right there loving you.
Yeah.
And my life is a thank you note. And so I was waking up every day trying to tread water and be enough for the God that I had in my previous paradigm. And now I wake up and I feel like I'm daddy's favorite. And I think you are too.
That's incredible.
It's a really different way to be.
That fires me up. Well, anyway. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you.
It was long overdue catch up.
Thank you so much.
And honestly, it was so much more than I anticipated. I've been looking forward to chatting with you for a long time.
Same.
But I haven't.
This was incredible.
I haven't fully caught up on like life. And you've kicked butt in life since we've chatted and really gone deep. So
You've always been kicking butt in life. I need to take notes.
Can't wait to cheer for kind of like the next steps of the journey. And we love being a part of it. We love participating wherever we can participate.
Thank you for all you've done. You've been very generous along the way. I remember when we were getting those families out of Afghanistan and you guys just gave this huge check. And literally to this day, I get messages by those families like pictures of their little kids playing and saying thanks.
It's incredible.
Anyway, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for doing that.
So good.
Thanks,
oh my
man.
gosh. My bucket is full.